afternoon. So welcome everyone. It's 4 p.m. and we're going to get started. And just a little bit of logistics. Because we're recording this, as well as you'll get the slides and the recording together tomorrow, we've muted the lines, but we have a question and answer box. So feel free if you have any questions while we're going through our conversation here. And as timing winds down, we'll also be able to answer some of the questions you so kindly, as a group, many of you have sent in different independent questions. And we can take questions after, as well as you can reach out to all of us. I'll give you the contact information at the end of the webinar. So welcome to Future Food, Food Future, and how to grow your business using a distributor. Now, first, the Innovation and Research Studio at George Brown College had a workshop before Christmas, and Serene had actually been one of the participants. Sandi was out of town at that time, and we were really excited by the interest shown around questions around the distributor and how to work with the retailers, et cetera, for the kinds of clients that we deal with at first. So we thought this might be a good kickoff workshop from a webinar standpoint, so all of us can be in our warm offices on a cold winter day, as well as probably not always have to drive down to the inner part of the city. But I do, by way of introduction, want to thank NSERC for being a sponsor, as well as then Tree of Life and the Food Innovation Studio at George Brown College. And so, as always, I get into my technical challenge. I do want to welcome Sandi, Hester, and Serene, and then Michelle, who all of you know, Keynes from FIRST, are on the line. Serene is the Senior Manager of New Business Development with Tree of Life, and she's on the right-hand side of my screen, a little blonder than Sandi. And Sandi is the Senior Director of Natural and Organic at Tree of Life. And I do welcome you both. I do want to say it's funny to read everyone's bios in terms of the number of years that all of us have spent within the food industry, and how everyone seems to have a passion around, over and above, we all eat, so there's a familiarity to food, but it's funny as you look at everyone's bio. When Serene had started with companies and in the marketing and advertising area with the breweries and General Motors and Toys R Us, and then she evolved over into the passion and love of the food industry. And Sandi and I share a past together. We spent a number of years at Wrigley, Canada, and she too moved over to Tree of Life because of her passion for the natural and organic food, and she loves the purpose that's around the organization of helping Canada eat well and live well. And you guys are going to tell us the Tree of Life story, so I won't go into that. And then Michelle, who is our Manager of Industry Liaison Business Development. Well, she has quite the academic and professional development career, but she's really sort of the agri-technology kind of person, and she actually sometimes helps her parents on their cash cart from farm in southwestern Ontario. So over and above eating food, she certainly enjoys working in the industry and is deeply committed to growing the food value chain, and she loves working with the various Canadian companies that we've had the pleasure of working with at FIRST. And so in terms of what we're going to be doing, as I mentioned, there will be the question and answer period, and I do want to thank Tree of Life as well, who is helping Canada eat well and live well. And for those of you that are less familiar with the organization, part of the questions we have today are around what is a distributor and what makes Tree of Life a little bit different. So Sandi and Serene are going to be answering those questions, so I won't go into too much dialogue around that. But what I would like to share with you is our objectives here. We want to create a dialogue with the various organizations that we work with, our joint venture partners, as well as our clients at FIRST, and get them understanding the various parts or steps of the product development process. As you know, at FIRST, we work really from product concept right through to commercialization, and every client has different needs, as you're going to hear about the distribution needs and how they can be different from Sandi and Serene. We also want to share experiences and answer questions that we've had as longtime people in the food industry, and I think you're going to get a lot of that out of today's workshop. So really, without sort of too much fanfare here, Sandi, let's start with you. Around the Canadian food industry, let's sort of describe it, set the stage. People come to us and say, well, I'm in 6 of these stores in a natural channel, or I'm in 6 of those stores, I'm in 25 stores. What does all that mean when you look at the industry in whole?
Okay, well, first of all, Tricia, I just want to say thank you for having Serene and I on today. We love talking to people, especially as they start their journey into building a food business. Any way we can help get them off on the right foot, is beneficial to us. So thank you for having us here today. If I look at the Canadian retail landscape, and I think this chart says it all, really the top 5 players control 80% of the volume. So Loblaws, Walmart, Costco, Sobeys, and Metro they sell 80% of the grocery volume in Canada. So very concentrated retail trade. The 20% of the 20% that's left, about 10% is strong regional chains. So you've got your Save-On Foods, your Longos, things like that. And then 10 to 11% is really your small 1- and 2-store independents. And it's really important when you're planning your launch strategy that you build a plan for these major retailers. You may not choose to do business with them in year 1, but you need to understand when and how you will engage with them, because it is important to have these as part of your selling strategy if you're going to build a brand with any significant volume.
And this is great. And I know we're going to get into this a little bit more as we move through this, because we have had people that get into maybe a Loblaws, and then it's how do I work with the rest of the industry? Other people do come in through the back sort of ways. So this kind of really leads me to my next question, which is for you, Serene, which is sort of there are different channels, and when we have our clients in, we often say, do you want to go retail? Do you want to go online? Do you want to go food service, club, etc.? So how do you guys set someone up? Because you do obviously address food service channel, natural channel, the major retailers, etc. So what happens in the way of thinking and dialogue you have with the clients?
Well, the title says it all here. I mean, where you start depends on your product and your budget. I mean, we often come across producers that are so passionate about their product, and they love it, but the planning, unfortunately, doesn't stop there. You really have to think about, often, lately products have come out of personal stories, and we love that. We love a compelling story to take to market. But it's really, who is your primary target consumer? That can be age group, that can be lifestyle, it can be demographics, but it can also be psychographics. So it can range from the age versus is it compelling to someone who maybe has an allergy, and you really have to look at how that translates to what are the trends out there in the marketplace right now, and what is important to Canadian consumers. There really has to be a marriage there, and because that marriage ultimately is your relationship with the customer, because they're always looking for the latest and greatest. Where does this demographic shop? Where does this target consumer shop? Is it a grab and go? Is it maybe a millennial who is looking for convenience but is very focused on shopping local? We have a very advanced consumer now, and they're very complex, and it's not just, I mean, when I was in school, it was about cheap and quick. And nowadays, the younger generation, it's so much more than that. How much can you invest in listing fees? The reality is, these days, there is a cost of doing business in Canada. And so we'll get into listing fees a little bit more later, but basically there is a cost to have your product on shelf in the stores. How scalable is my manufacturing? Very, very important. Do I have the ability to produce a large amount if I immediately gain a listing at 1,000 Loblaws stores? Or is my production initially, does it only have the ability to hit just a few stores to start and gain traction and volume and growth? We'll go from there. And then how much uncertainty do I want? Some retailers will guarantee a life on shelf for a year or 2 years, or you're in for a rotation like Costco. And there's a little more, you may get high volume at Costco, but there's a little higher uncertainty there. So that's basically a decision you have to make.
So I see we have lots of great charts here where you've got the channel, the product, and distribution, promotion, and sales coverage. And there's some great questions as you kind of go through here. And then we didn't really talk, but I know you service the food service area. When do you sort of say to someone, go food service versus retail?
We actually, Tree of Life actually works more with branded products, Tricia. So we typically start in the retail arena and then take it into food service after that. Certainly we, the products that we put into food service, the grab and go are often branded, but then we have bulk products as well, especially in gluten-free and things like that. It can go the other way. Absolutely, it can come in through food service, and then we bring it out to retail. But the brand development usually starts at retail.
Okay, good to know. Good sort of.
Just to add to the, your retail and your channel strategy, we just basically broke. No, if you want to back up just a little bit on those charts.
Sure.
We really break it down by retail channel here. So, and these are the general things you need to think about. Your channel, whether it's independent, mainstream, grocery, mass, like Walmart, drug, you have to look at your product, your price, and how it correlates with your channel, your distribution, your promotion, and what is expected of the channel, the promotion, and the sales coverage. So, there's some late night reading here. But this really gives you a really good snapshot of what is required by channel.
Yeah, and I think I'd like to call attention to the title, and we're going to probably be hitting everybody over the head quite a bit with this message, but researching and planning your channel strategy should be done before you sell your first case. All of the retailers watch each other. They watch the retails that they have out on the different brands, and you can get yourself stuck if you haven't thought through how you're going to sell, service, and distribute to each of these channels. And at the end of the day, the goal is to have a very narrow price range in market.
I think that's a really good point, and thank you for pointing that out on the heading of your slide, because we tend not to focus on that blind space above, the charts and start going across them. But everyone will have a copy of this, so don't feel stressed about taking notes or whatever, but it will be in the recording. So in terms of then that kind of channeling down here, Sandi, who is Tree of Life, and what's the range of services that you guys are offering? I asked, is this a one-stop shop? How do you guys work with the various people that approach you? And I know you've been very open. Serene was terrific at our last workshop where, give me your card, I'm happy to connect with you. So maybe you could give us a bit of background and around what you guys do.
Okay. Well, we like this part because this is where we get the free advertising. But Tree of Life is really a full-service national distributor, and we're actually quite unique in that area. So we sell and distribute to over 90% of where food is sold in Canada, as measured by Nielsen ACV. So you can see we have quite a wide scope. We are known for our strong relationships with our major chains and our strength in the independent channel covering them. We have Canada's largest distributor sales force, so we have over 30 customer development managers calling on the head office. They all have support teams because they're fairly sophisticated customers and take quite a bit of work. We have over 100 sales reps in the field, making sure that what's agreed to at head office is actually executed at store level, and in the independents actually taking orders and making sure that that the products are on the shelf. We have what we call a client management structure. That is one of our core strengths. You actually, if you work with Tree of Life as a brand client, you are given a client manager or a business manager. That business manager is sort of your champion inside Tree of Life. They act as a single point of contact. They would coordinate all communication internally. They do analysis on your brand and come up with opportunities and areas to grow. They look after the financial side, so all the trade spend tracking, and provide you with monthly reporting and things like that. We have a category management team that works with the retailers on planograms, on assortment recommendations, promotional recommendations, all data-based and very heavily data-driven. Of course, we have a logistics team, and we deliver things many different ways. Each brand and each customer has a different requirement, and we have a great success record. We've grown by over 50% in the past 5 years, and what we're most proud of, though, is 65% of that growth comes from our base business.
And when you say base business, what are you talking about?
Brands that we have had for those at the beginning of those 5 years versus new brands that we've brought on. We've had some brands. I was just going to say, Serene works on a brand that we've had for 37 years. 37 years, and it's had double-digit growth last year. So we're all very excited.
And then when I listen to you here, Sandi, I think the important distinction is that it sounds so comprehensive, and I know we've got other slides too around your national, exposure. Here we've got your map, etc. But because you have all these services, the small guy can work with you too. It's not just because the idea is, I guess, that 37-year-old brand grew with you, right?
Absolutely. We started them from their first case in Canada, and we do launch a lot of brand new small brands every year. That's part of our business model, is to be always be growing new brands. So we are very interested in new brands. This is just a snapshot of some of our bigger brands. You probably recognize Cliff, Thai Kitchen, Walker's, Kikkoman on there, Nature's Path. So these are all brands that we manage and we sell in the marketplace.
But the good part for me is that they're not only Unilever and P&G. When I look at this list, I feel it's lots of the brands that we work with on a day-to-day basis that are the future of the food industry. So I like this slide.
Yeah. So our target is small to mid-sized brands, and we also our value proposition to our customers is what we call it making on-trend easy. And our customers come to us for the innovation and the new. So it's very, very important to us to always have a good stream of new innovative products.
People kind of look to you guys for that, don't they?
Yes, that's our role.
Yeah.
In the market with the retailer.
That's great. So then, Serene, taking Tree of Life as a distributor, then, can you define a little bit about sort of what the role of the distributor is, and sort of how you play out in the national channels, and what's the difference between a distributor and a broker, those kinds of things?
Sure. Yeah. Well, Tree of Life, along with what Sandi said in our sort of our brand development, our brand management, we have two vital functions: selling and distribution. So we call on the head office sales, and I just want to point out that the way we go through and we talk about the differences between broker and distributor, it's very specific to Tree of Life. I can't speak on other distributors because we are quite unique, as Sandi mentioned. But we negotiate the listings with the head offices. We can recommend POG placement, meaning the permanent home on shelf for your product is kind of called a planogram, and we make recommendations. We plan the promo activity with the head offices on your behalf. We work on category reviews, and we do the opportunity analysis for them. And we work on developing a promotional plan and build a brand strategy for the category that your brand is selling in. We also have feet on the street, where we call on direct-to-store chain and independents. We ensure compliance, whether it's making sure the supply chain is executed properly at store level. We ensure compliance. We make sure the tags are up. We ensure that out of stocks are taken care of. We take orders. we work on securing secondary displays, and we take care of store audits for you.
Sounds pretty comprehensive.
Yeah.
And your other then functions are?
Well, we just wanted to kind of lay it out, and I think this is great because it just shows manufacturer to warehouse. There's basically two ways we can do it. We can do direct to store, which is we buy it from you, we warehouse it and sell it direct to store, or we warehouse it, drop it in a customer warehouse, and it's their responsibility to get it out to store.
I see. Oh, okay. That makes sense. Definitely.
Yeah. I just want to add, the model is driven by the customer and how the customer wants to receive the product. And when it goes into the customer warehouse, there's lots of different ways it goes into the warehouse. So it's not necessarily just a pallet going in. It could be cross-stock. You know, we have customers that we do what we call flow, which is just in time. So there's lots of different ways we work with our customers to ensure that they get the product the way that they want, either for their specific supply chain.
It's interesting when some of the smaller companies come to us because we're not even thinking about these steps. So I really value that this webinar is making you know, making us all a little bit more aware of all these kinds of things. We're just kind of happy to get it in a jar sometimes. And so it's a very complex system, and yet, as you said, there's only six retailers kind of. Why get so complicated? But it does. Now, the broker-distributor role, Serene?
Yeah, and you know, there are distinct differences between you know, a full-service distributor such as Tree of Life and brokers. Not all distributors are full service, so I'm speaking on sort of what I know from my home, which is Tree of Life. Occasionally and often working with both a distributor and a broker, there is a duplication in services, especially when it comes to the full service model like Tree of Life. So yes, the broker will take care of head office calls as we do. They will check coverage at a field sales level, as do we. They do offer a client management. Depending on the arrangement, you know, sometimes we've got because we're the vendor of record, we have a lot of the information. So there's a tad bit of duplication there if you're working with both a broker and a distributor. The broker does not purchase the product. They basically work on a commission of net sales, and we get paid through a markup on the sale, which we'll get into it later when we talk about a specific example of pricing.
Okay.
You know, managing the customer and financial transactions and billings. No, they'll help resolve issues, the broker will. But we absolutely, you know, we have many departments within our finance department that, you know, manage customer financial transactions. So that's a 100% service of a distributor.
So a broker doesn't get involved in the financial transactions at all in terms of action, but we do because we're selling and they are billing us back. So yeah, it's a full management there.
Okay.
Yeah. We do arrange pickup of product at manufacturer and shipping. Like, we pick up from anywhere, locally or international. We're lucky that we have the capability to pick up anywhere. They do not deliver to customer. We do. We both have the ability to manage sub-distributors. So often with you know, delivering to a specialty market, there's often the use of a sub-distributor because it's their specialty, like the ethnic channel. Mm-hmm. So we both have that ability to service both sub-distributors. Yeah.
This is a great chart. This kind of summarizes the questions where it's all sort of, I guess, foggy sometimes when you're first starting in the food industry. And then, Sandi, just one of the things that came up when we had the workshop at first in November was some of the manufacturers, the smaller ones, were talking about going direct. And I'm curious just sort of what the implication of sometimes when you do something like that. You know, you get one listing somewhere, and it could be, you know, it could be a Metro, it could be a Sobeys or something like that. Is there sort of pros and cons to doing that? Does it mean you can't work with you guys, or it gets messy? What kind of happens?
Well, there are reasons to go direct. There are pros and cons, and it doesn't preclude working with us. But again, it involves thinking it through before you make that first sale. So I guess there's three kind of reasons people go direct. I mean, you brought up one of them, Tricia, which is initially they go, you know, they're an entrepreneur, they've made a product, they get a call at Sobeys, they go, yeah, I love it, and in they go direct. The second is when their volume gets to be quite large, the retailer may actually say, you know what, your volume warrants a spot in my warehouse. I would like you to ship directly to me.
Okay.
And the third is sometimes price. If you're in a highly price competitive category and it's just not working, then sometimes there's a case to be made to take it direct. However, if you look at those three situations, you have to make sure you're prepared to go direct. And there's a couple things. First of all, and Serene's going to get into a little further, especially when you're talking about that initial sale, you need to make sure that you have enough margin built in that if you need a distributor or if you need sales help to go to other customers potentially, or even that customer, that you have that margin built in. The biggest mistake people make initially is when they go and they sell it to a Loblaws or Sobeys and it's their first account and they don't put enough margin in, and then they go, okay, I can't scale this. I can't personally call on every single retailer out there. Now I need to hire a broker or distributor, and I haven't left enough margin in there to do that. And then again, it gets back to Loblaws watches Sobeys, they watch Costco, they watch Walmart. So you've got to be able to keep that pricing still in a tight range. So really thinking about your pricing strategy before you go and approach a direct retailer is extremely important. The other thing to realize, and we're going to get into this again further on in the presentation, but the big retailers are fairly complex to work with. There's a lot of fees, there's a lot of charges, and you really need to understand that retailer in order to be profitable working with them. And you need to have the resources to put behind the administrative burden of dealing with those retailers.
So that's a great answer, and I think that's going to feed into a little bit my next question with Serene, which is, we've been talking before Christmas, the three of us together, and I would, you know, to sort of organize this workshop, and I mentioned was having sort of a retail pricing strategy. So leads me into the next slide. So can you give me an example or why someone has to do it? I know Sandy's alluded to a number of aspects of it. Serene, what's your take on it?
Just to add to what Sandy said, you know, we first of all, we've been in many meetings where we talk about pricing and going to market, and we say, you know what, we're just adding costs and it's not the best for the brand. But it's just, there are three objectives or four objectives. You have to be priced correctly versus your competition in the market. We get a lot of brands that say, listen, I have a great mac and cheese, but I don't want to be, I'm not Kraft, you know, I don't want to be 99 cents. This is premium, you know, Irish cheese, and this is Irish butter, and, you know, I want to be premium priced. So that's very okay, but that's a certain channel, and then that's a certain opportunity for everybody. Parity, you know, is your price consistent with similar products in your category? You know, that's very important. You know, if you are a product that maybe is not first to market, if you have something that's great, but maybe there's lots of competition out there, you know, it's probably not the best strategy to be the most expensive on shelf. So timing is also very important. And is there a cost advantage? That's very important. You know, to have a second objective, to have pricing integrity in the marketplace. You know, as Sandi said, and we mentioned we were going to be repeating things because it's so important, you know, these large retailers look at each other. And the worst thing you could do is give a really good price to your first customer because they're your first customer, and then you price everybody else out in the and you're unable to meet their requirements. And it also really promotes retailer relationships if you maintain pricing integrity. I just want to say that when you work with a singular distributor, it is our strength. We are very careful to maintain that pricing integrity across all customers. What I wanted to add to Sandi's point about going direct, you know, everybody needs to make money in this situation, in your go-to-market strategy. Number one, you, but everybody that you're dealing with along the way is running a business, and so it's very important to make sure you've got margin in, you know, the price you're offering, to make sure that you're making money, and it is an investment to grow in the Canadian marketplace. So you just have to think that through quite a bit before you sell your first case. So, and if possible, national pricing is advised. It helps with managing the national accounts, Walmart, LCL, Sobeys.
And then we talked a bit about net pricing strategy then?
Yeah. So I'm going to first talk about the word net price. The net price is sort of the base price that you are giving your customer. There is something in the industry that we call programs, and some customers actually charge you almost a fee to do business with them. You don't get anything for these fees. This isn't promotions. This isn't flyers. This is just a cost of doing business. And what we do is we actually add that fee to the net price. And that, again, is to ensure pricing integrity, that everybody can peel back to that same net price. And it also helps ensure profitability, because some of these programs can be quite expensive. Some of them go up as high as 20%. So if you start with the manufacturer list price, the price that we're getting from the manufacturer, the distributor will look at that. They will say, okay, here's my manufacturer list price. I have to make sure I do a currency conversion if it's not Canadian, duty, what is the inbound freight, and then I have to look at what deal and promo spend do I need to support this brand at the retailer. And doing all of that, I come up with what I call the landed cost. So that would be, for this example, just $4.53.
Okay.
Just an example. We then put a margin that can range anywhere from 20 to 30%, but just to be safe, if you're doing your planning, you should probably use 30. We said, okay, we need 30% margin, so we're going to sell it to our retailer for $6.49. The retailer then makes between 35 and 40% margin on most food, especially specialty, small and niche brands. So they're going to sell it for $9.99 to $10.49. And what you want to do as a manufacturer is you want to keep that range as tight as possible. There are going to be brands that you sell direct that are going to be maybe priced a little bit sharper, but at the end of the day, you don't want that range to get too big, because you will start to get in trouble with the different retailers. And this chart's really important because when if you go and you do retail price checks to see what your competitors might be, you want to make sure when you back it up to see what you need to be that you put the proper supply chain margins in. And again, it gets back to that whole direct piece, where if somebody goes in and sells direct and forgets that if they need a distributor or a broker, there will be another component there, they kind of get stuck in that direct model, and you can't support that direct model across the country as a small organization.
That kind of sums that one up, doesn't it? No, I mean, you don't appreciate it when you're the consumer buying it, what's involved with the various steps. But I like your point, Serene, that the manufacturer's in the business of making money, as are the various support services through the industry, and yet it's amazing how it adds up.
Yeah, and Serene just brought up a point. She slipped me a piece of paper because this is very important. We make recommendations to retailers on pricing. It's actually illegal to dictate pricing to retailers. So even though you think you might want to be out at a $9.99, they may have another idea. But we work very hard with them to manage that gap in the marketplace.
And again, things you never even think of when you start out. So the listing process, we got this question from quite a few of the participants. How long does that whole process take? You know, is it a few months, or sort of what's the lead time? How long does it take? How long is it going to before I can make some money, Sandy?
Well, on the independent side, it can be quite quick. You can walk in and make a sale and have it in the next day. But with the larger retailers, it's quite complex, and it starts with their category review schedule. So if Loblaws is reviewing their natural category in February and you launch something in March, you may have a whole year to wait before you can actually be considered for the section. Okay. Usually it's once or twice a year, but sometimes it can be once a year. So it starts with the retailer's category review schedule. Then you present the item. And it's really important when you're presenting your item, as Serene said, everybody is so passionate about their own product, but you really have to think about how is it different, how will it grow the category, because retailers aren't interested in taking out something that sells one and putting in something that sells one. They want to take something out that sells one and put something in that has the potential to sell two. So you have to have an idea about how you will grow the category, and you also have to have a support plan to propose based on your promotions and your listing fees. Then if the item's accepted, the retailer loves it, they want to put it on their shelf, you'll finalize the negotiations on the listing fees and promotions. The retailer, either in conjunction with Tree of Life or on their own, will create a planogram, and then they go into item setup. Item setup can take 12 weeks on its own. It's a very complex process. And then they roll it out to the stores. So, as you know, back to the title, for the big chains, it can be anywhere from 3 months to 18 months until it hits the shelf. And we always talk to new vendors coming on board, and basically talk about the fact that it's going to take 2 years before you start to realize your distribution potential. In terms of the Canadian landscape.
And I guess this also then, putting this in context, also then one of the challenges is all the kinds of brands that are coming that are very fresh with short shelf life. This whole process gets complicated.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important to manage your inventory. I mean, just because you may get a listing, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be on shelf right away. So it's very important to manage, your shelf life, and it is okay to challenge the retailer a little bit if they, on the other hand, if they list you and they want you next week, it's perfectly okay to say, I'm going to have your stock in 4 weeks, and that's your lead time. They need to understand you have a manufacturing, responsibility as well, and so it's definitely fair to be honest and transparent. That's one thing that's all over our corporate overview is transparency and honesty, and it's just the best way to do business, and we are really proud of that as well.
Yeah. And I actually, if you got a key account listing and you had 500 stores, I would not produce that product until I had a firm ship date. Yeah. Purchase. I would ask them for a certain lead time, get a purchase order from them, because the retailers are notorious for changing, and you don't want a warehouse full of inventory.
That's a really good point. So I know, Sandy, you did talk about the fee structures. with, you showed the 30, 35, etc. Is there any other rules of thumb around those fee structures that we need to kind of dive deeper on?
Yeah, there's quite a few fees when you're working with the larger accounts, and I'll just list some of them off. The first is listing fees. So even independents will ask you for what they call a free fill, 1 case per store per SKU. But the chains have listing fee structures. I can't really give you much of a sense. They're quite varied. It depends on the category that you're entering. It depends on the number of stores that the retailer is going to commit to putting you in. Just on the natural side, it can be anywhere from $1,600 a SKU to $10,000, and on the specialty side, it can be up to $100,000 a SKU. And I know refrigerated or freezer space can be even higher. So it really does depend on the product, and we'd have to work with you on an estimate for listing fees. We also, just on the listing fee side, just we often target like 1 or 2 customers a year if there's limited funds. The other thing to know is there's delisting fees. So this is really important. If your product doesn't sell and it ends up being delisted, there are retailers that will put a deep discount on it to move it through, and will charge you back that discounted amount as you're losing the business. So it's a bit of a double kick on that one. There are program fees, as I talked about earlier. So these are sort of the cost of doing business with some of these chains. And you need to be really, really aware of these, because if you go in with a net price and they subtract them off that invoice, you're not going to be left with a very profitable business. So having those conversations either with your distributor or with your or with the customer up front, and understanding that fee structure is very important. EDLPs, some retailers will ask for an EDLP. And what they're asking for there is they're asking you to take the trade spend, the money that you've got for your promotions and flyers, and work that back into a net price. There's a couple of things to be careful of when you're doing this. First of all, I would never put all of it in, because you will need some. And second of all, you need to monitor the activity at the account and ensure that you're getting your money's worth. And if you're not, you have to have those conversations. The other thing, it's not really a fee, but again, we talked about, make sure that you've got promotional funds built in, either at your end or your distributor has them built in, so that you can properly support the brand. A rule of thumb is you would need about 15 to 17% of selling price to the retailer to support that. And the other thing I want to bring up is fines and administrative fees. So if you short ship one of the big retailers, they do have policies where they may fine you, and the fines can be quite punitive. And as well as if you have a recall, there will be administration fees. So again, it's just really, really important to, if you're not familiar with these customers yourself, to have somebody, a partner that is, because you stand to gain some great volume, but you can also stand to lose quite a bit of money if you don't understand sort of all the buckets that fall out.
Some sobering facts there. So then how does the small guy succeed? Serene, Sandi?
Well, I'll talk to that. I think, the theme of our presentation is do your homework. Really understand your consumer, how your product uniquely meets their needs. Understand your competition and how you want to be positioned against them. Understand how your product will grow the retailer's category sales. Have a pricing and channel strategy. Even if you're not going to go talk to certain retailers in year one, at least know when you get there, how you're going to get there. And really important, know your strengths as an organization. And then you have to build, you can't do everything yourself, especially if you're small. So you have to build strong partnerships in the areas that aren't your strengths. And you have to recognize that these relationships are absolutely vital to your success. We always say we're in the relationship business. And then if you're working with a distributor partner, I thought I'd take a minute to talk about our best partners and our most successful partnerships. have absolute transparency. We tell each other everything because it's highly responsive. So when we ask a question, we get an answer back literally that day because opportunities can evaporate quite quickly. A high level of trust. You know, our success is linked to our brand partners' success. They are commingled. You can't separate them. So it really is a partnership in the truest sense of the word. And the other thing is, if you're working with a distributor or a broker, it is important to be involved. We kind of have a saying, I can't love your brand more than you do. Mm-hmm. So that's a really important thing as well.
That's a great tip. Now, I do have some questions that have come in, and one is a good one from Carolyn. She says, so how do you introduce the company? What happens if it doesn't sell at a retail store?
So those, I guess, are two different questions.
Yeah.
How do you introduce a company? I mean, some people are very good at getting in to see the category managers, but one of the things, you know, back to getting a distributor, one of the things that we offer is access to those category managers because, as you can imagine, they're very, very busy, and not everybody can get in to see them. But how you get exposure? You get in to see those people, and you know, I guess you make your pitch. Up and down the street, you could probably go in and talk to the grocery managers and most independents. What happens if your product doesn't sell? And again, this goes back to doing why you have to do your homework up front, because failure is fairly expensive if you are with a larger chain. If it doesn't hit hurdle rates, then it will be delisted. And with some customers, that's all there is to it. It's just delisted. They don't order anymore. But with a few customers, they will actually then deep discount it and bill you back the amount of the deep discount.
So that can be sobering. Then we have the founder and co-owner of The Spread, and they've been asking, they have quite a few questions, but are there minimum volumes that must be met?
So I'll answer that first from a retailer perspective and then from a distributor perspective.
Okay, that would be, yeah.
Yeah, so each retailer has what I'm going to call velocity rates that they define in their categories. And in the mainstream brands, like if you were Kraft or General Mills, they're very well defined. So you have to hit a certain hurdle rate to stay in the section. What we find in the natural and organic and in the specialty and gourmet, which is sort of where we focus, we bring a different role to the store. We bring them differentiation and innovation. So we tend to have a bit of a longer leash in terms of hurdle rates, but there would definitely be, you know, if you were on shelf for a couple of years and you weren't selling very much, yes, you would find yourself discontinued. But again, the role of the category for the brands that we usually represent is sort of that differentiation. So as I said, we get a bit of a longer leash there. Okay. In terms of the distributor, it goes back to the 2-year mark is almost a pretty important mark. So we will work pretty hard for 2 years on behalf of a brand. And it's kind of at that point that we go, okay, is it growing? Is it on track? Will it get big? Or is it time now to say, you know what, we can't manage this? We have a pretty good success rate because we do a lot of homework. And you know, subject for another day, we can talk about that. But so it's not something that happens a lot. If we take them on, you know, it's a pretty good chance they'll be successful. But it is about that 2-year mark where we make that evaluation.
I just wanted to add that in terms of volumes that we commit to from a distributor is very dictated based on the listing you get. So we don't like to over-inventory ourselves. It's not good for anyone. So we do start with minimal quantities in the beginning. When you gain a listing, we'll order more, and you know, we'll work on forecasting with you. So just in terms of our order requirements, we really like to keep it really efficient in the beginning.
Isn't it important too, I mean, to have some perspective when you're talking the velocity of brands, et cetera. I remember in my Wrigley days, Sandy, when you would stand there video recording how many packages of gum might be sold in all those sections when you 10 checkout lines. It's not like packages of gum are flying off the shelf every 2 minutes. Like, it's actually quite slow for lots of brands, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
so when you say there's this many Canadians and this many eat this ethnic food or an egg roll or whatever, when you start going down and saying how frequently do they buy it, I mean, you can talk about deodorant, might be 2 or 3 times a year you purchase a brand like that, where milk is weekly. So that also impacts.
Is it a rapid consumable or not? And when you're looking at specialty and gourmet, it's definitely, I mean, a box of cookies could be consumed quite quickly, whereas a box of or a jar of curry paste may take you 6 months to use. So yeah, it's very indicative of your turns for sure.
So that's sort of an interesting thing. But I know we kind of think of these, it's $50 million brands must be moving all the time. And when you get the numbers, when you're the brand person, it's kind of a surprise that they sold 6 bags of chips or something like that. Then, of course.
Yeah, especially when you get to gas and convenience. It's a big number in total, but the movement in that is not very high.
No, but people have to keep that in mind too. So then one of the other questions we got was, is it common to use more than one distributor, sort of depending on geographic area or being targeted? Does that happen?
So the answer to that is, I guess it depends. Tree of Life is a national distributor.
Okay.
And we have quite far-reaching sales and distribution capabilities. So our preference for brands is exclusivity. And the reason for that is, again, we get back to pricing integrity in the market. We can better manage it if we're the only person kind of touching it or the only entity touching it. But the other thing is, if we're exclusive, we can focus on what we call brand building versus fighting other distributors on pricing, because there always ends up being overlap. And they'll, if we're in an account, and this goes from the independents all the way up to the chains. On the independents, they might buy from a different person every week, whoever has the best deal. With the chains, what happens is if we have the business, our competitor might come in and try and undercut us. And so we spend a lot of time on price and not as much time on building the brand. So we really prefer exclusive agreements where we can focus all of our attention on brand building. Having said that, there are very few national full-service distributors. I think we are actually a little bit unique in that area. So if you are working with regional distributors, you will need to put together a network of distributors.
And so then there's some good points on what you said there. And I think this goes back to another question that we kind of touched on. What does a working relationship with a distributor look like? Is the merchandise stored in your warehouse before shipping? I think you talked about that, Sandy, but maybe just reinforce it. And then its summarized question was, what are the mechanics of the relationship between the person creating the product and the distributor? How often do you talk or meet or call? How does that work? I know you keep talking transparency, but what's happening?
Okay, so let me start with the buy-sell. The distributor is buy-sell, so we buy the inventory from you and we sell it to the customers. And what that means is we are taking on the financial liabilities with the customer. So whether they pay, whether we get deductions or fines, we are the vendor of record of that for that brand for the customer. And then the second thing that you asked about is the working relationship with the distributor. And we've used the word transparency over and over again, but it is just so important. If you're having a stock issue, you have to tell us as soon as you know, because we can then go and talk to the customer, maybe cut some purchase orders back so that we avoid fines, and manage the situation so that they don't get upset and discontinue the item. We're very transparent about any issues that happen. but really it is about transparency, it's about responsiveness, and it's about understanding that we're truly in it together. We both succeed or we both fail. And our success is so commingled that we have to be almost an extension of your organization.
And last but not least, as we roll down to the hour, how do you choose the right distributor, or what are important things to consider when deciding?
Well, I think the first thing you want to look at is what geography do they cover, and is that meeting your needs? What channels are they covering? What is their head office coverage like? What are the accounts they're calling on? How often are they calling on them? What's the field coverage like? How many accounts are they calling on? How often are they calling on them? How do they manage the financial side of the business? So, you know, we talked a lot about the programs and the promotions and the fines and things like that. We have a very prescribed way of handling that, and we like to say there's no surprises. Not everybody is like that. Some of them are just clearinghouses, and it just comes right back at you. So,
if I may add, you know, I encourage you to meet every distributor, because you know, it sounds so simple, but you will get a gut feel. To Sandy's point about relationships, and it really is about relationships. This industry is small, and you know, we've worked with many of the same individuals on different products and brands, and you know, if one doesn't work, another one might, and they keep coming back because it's that relationship that's built.
And yeah, so just to sort of end, the most important thing is the fit.
Is the fit.
It's a partnership, and there has to be a good fit.
And I just want to end by, you know, just hats off to all these manufacturers. You remember that you're so important to the fabric of our food landscape in Canada, and you offer something substantial to the retailer. It's offering the consumer choice, and you add diversity to their shelves, and that's a huge thing to have on your side.
And we certainly see that too, because I think the entrepreneur is pushing the big guy too, because they're really taking on the challenges and making unique products that the larger guys just can't do, which is allowing us the wonderful creativity that we have in food today.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, if you want to learn more, if you've got more questions, you can reach out to Michelle at George Brown, to Sandy or Serene. You can also reach out to me. I'm Tricia Ryan. You've all gotten emails from me, so I guess you got my contact information. Sandy, Serene, Michelle, thank you for all the help in pulling this together. I've learned a lot. I've really enjoyed this time. If people have any further questions, I'll pass them on as they get filtered through. Tomorrow I'll have this uploaded and everyone can have a copy if they want to listen to it again or review the slides with all the wonderful math and numbers and ideas in it. But I really learned a lot, and it's been a great opportunity to spend an hour talking with you guys, even though I kind of pestered you like the day before Christmas with all my questions. But good work comes out of planning. Thank you and have a wonderful evening, and I appreciate your help.
You're more than welcome. Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.